Welcome back to Discovering an Educated Life. This is Megan, and I just want to share with you guys today what we've been doing in a 6-week update with our adventures in U.S. history and our favorite part, history, because that's the bulk of that curriculum. Obviously, it's right in the title, and it's the reason we purchased it is for that history portion. And so I'm just going to dig right in. So the main two books that are like the spine are American Pioneers and Patriots. This is from Christian Liberty Press, and we've been using the Story of the U.S. This is from their publishing. My Father's World published this, but it is from it's adapted from D.H. Montgomery, and it was the Beginner's American History, so it's like adapted lessons from that, so it's a little different. Anyway, so we have covered so far the first few chapters of this, and I think the first 5 units of American Pioneers and Patriots, and I just want to briefly show you how a unit looks. So the very first unit we did, I loved some of the maps. It had like the Spanish exploration. This is all about the first pioneers, and as we dug in, the first page of every unit is more historical based, like information. And so we did a lot with our map whenever we would, like My Father's World, I don't think I have it sitting here. I think it's actually back here behind me on our IKEA cart, but it's a 2-sided map, and we used that map a lot while we did that portion. So then these next chapters that will follow are a story. And it's a story about, so far, it's been about just different pioneers from a child's perspective in different eras. And then at the end, there's always a page like this that's like a step-by-step, and this is how people lived on sailing ships. We've done how to make butter, how they made birch bark canoes, just different stuff like that. And then you have a unit review, and the unit review has questions. We've done all the questions. And then sometimes there are things in here that we've done, some of them we haven't. Like, it talks about like St. Augustine being the oldest city in the country, and like look up that on your map, look up where Puerto Rico is on a map. And we used like an hourglass timer or egg timers just to compare differences in how you told time on a ship, and then like drawing pictures. Just it's mostly crafts and things. So My Father's World does a really good job of scheduling that stuff for us, and sometimes we would find an extra thing in here we enjoyed, but most of the time, if it was like a really good idea, it was already scheduled in the teacher's guide for My Father's World, and I just kind of went off of that unless there was something great we saw. So those are the two main things, the Pioneers and Patriots in this book. And this book is used, the way My Father's World has used it is narrating it. So you'll read a story and then your child will narrate it back. And I break that down. If you've never done narrations, I break them down into like 1 or 2 paragraphs. She's getting a lot better this year. She's 8 now. So like, for instance, I probably did like this whole page, I believe. This has been like back in week 1, but the Leif Erikson and the Vikings. So I would do like a whole page, and then she would just narrate it and tell me what I read. And just to make sure she was comprehending that. So if you're not familiar with My Father's World, it's a grid like this. This is a very light week. It was the very first week of school. And so it'll have your Bible. It does schedule language arts, but you can use anything you want. And it's just kind of a box that says spelling or English. And then it has your history, and the history schedules everything you need for history for the year, including extra books that you can get from the library or just the book basket time, which we use what we want to use, but we love their book list. Sometimes it's even like snacks and things to bake and fun stuff like that. And then it goes all the way through art, math, reading, read alouds. There's so much scheduled in here. And I don't know if I have my read aloud sitting here, but that's okay. So I want to dig in and tell you, this is our notebook. I didn't get one that had a cover, so I just threw this on here. This is her notebook that she keeps all of her stuff in. So as we went through the year, we started with the Pledge of Allegiance, which she knows the pledge, and she's in 3rd grade, so she should. But what I liked about, right in the teacher's guide, it broke down definitions to all these words, and we went over it, and we understood what it really meant, and we went through all the history of the pledge, and it was a really just a learning experience. Actually, for both of us, there was stuff in there I didn't even know. So then We did maps, and then I did a few extras. I had a big pack of maps I picked up from Target, and I had her just kind of like see what states she knew so we can see at the end of the year what states she now knows. And I thought that was a good idea, maybe to review that a couple times. And then she did all of her continents and oceans, and the oceans she colored over so you can't really see where she wrote them, but she did know all those. And we just reviewed that and just kind of like a brief geography introduction. Then we moved into Leif Erikson. So she did these, like she colored this, and then she did her writing, and she wrote what she wanted to write and what information she remembered about Leif Erikson. And then we covered Christopher Columbus. And so we did these kind of like a unit. So first we did Leif Erikson, and while we did that, she read Viking Adventure by Clyde Robert Beulah aloud as her reader, but she also did Leif the Lucky with me, and she did narrate that to me. She read that one and then narrated it to me. She didn't read it aloud. While we were doing Christopher Columbus, I paired Encounter, which is the perspective of a young Taino native boy whose people were completely destroyed by Spanish exploration and Christopher Columbus coming to America, with a book called Follow the Dream, which was a nice two perspective pairing there, because this is the story of Christopher Columbus from Peter Sis, who is a Czechoslovakian immigrant who was inspired by Christopher Columbus. So I liked the pairing of these two books together to give two different perspectives. And then we also did Pedro's Journal. Pedro's Journal was her reader that was just, her book basket's right back behind me. This reader was in it, and she read this to herself and just told me about it. And it's a journal format of a boy that sailed with Christopher Columbus. It's historical fiction, and it just kind of made that time period come alive for her. And then we also did The Discovery of the Americas and Exploration and, oh, we got two books there. Exploration and Conquest, which is the Americas after Columbus from 1500 to 1620. This one I really liked. It had the Aztecs. No, maybe this one had the Aztecs. This one had the Mayan culture. It had the Hopewell. It had a lot of native peoples in this book that were already here for thousands, hundreds and thousands of years before Christopher Columbus came to the New World. But it also didn't just cover Christopher Columbus. It covered all of the exploration. And then this book covered what happened between 1500 and 1620. And so I really liked this book because this kind of painted the picture of all those explorers taking over. Because 1620, if you don't know, that's when the Pilgrims, that's when they came in the Mayflower and landed at Plymouth. So it's just showing between 1500, or after Columbus was done with his exploration, in 1620, what else happened between there. So there's a lot. And so I liked that, kind of filled in that gap for her as we moved on, because then she did use, I have these drawing books we've been using called Draw Right Now. So I have 2 and 3. Those are the years we're using. And they're just really simple. Like it shows you how to draw something, and it gives you a text to write. It's very simple format. And we're really liking these, and there's all different topics inside of them. So I will share some more of those. So she drew, this is supposed to be Christopher Columbus she drew, and then she wrote about him, and then she drew the world as portrayed by Columbus in that day, and then she wrote about that. She drew, this was, I think, once we got into just different exploration of ships, and that takes me to Jamestown. But between, I think that was there. Okay, so we did Jamestown, and for Jamestown, we read this book by James E. Knight. It was Jamestown, A New World Adventure. I read this aloud. It was one of those books that, it was kind of wordy for her. She reads a lot of chapter books, but for some reason, I think just the format of this, she wasn't really picking up on the storyline of it. So I just picked it up and read it aloud, and she understood it a lot better that way, and she really liked it. So, and then she did her writing on Jamestown, which most of these have not been enough for her. So she's had to add to the back with what she wrote. And then we dug into Native Americans. So the Native American history, this book was about different tribes, but it just kind of broke the country into like the Native Americans that lived in the Northwest, and then in the Northeast, and then the Southwest, the Southeast, the Plains. So we did use this book, but I didn't really like, and this is like one of the only things I can say I've had a complaint about, is that we didn't have notebooking pages for that. And so I actually picked up something else, and we're gonna kind of spread out some of our Native American study throughout the whole year, which I kind of think is what they were going with anyways, because in their book basket, they do suggest Native books all throughout the year. So something we're gonna do is we're just gonna do like almost like a lap booking throughout the entire year. As we do states, we'll cover, like when we're covering the colonial states, we'll cover some of the Native American tribes that were encountered when the colonies were being settled. And so we'll kind of work our way across as we do states, because we're doing them in chronological order that they were added to the Union. So that's how I'm planning on doing that. So anyways, she did have some of these books she read. She really enjoyed If You Lived with the Sioux. We also read We Own, If You Lived with the Cherokee, If You Lived with the Iroquois. We did some of those as well. And then we did a ton of these from the library. This is the only one I have because I own this one. This was the Shawnee. And I'm going to take some more of these out as we cover and do some lap booking throughout the year for our Native American studies. But she did some of her draw right now. So she drew some Native people. I also, something else that I thought was necessary was to do, this is an Apache woman from 1950. I just copied this out of the Dover, and I actually realized after that I wasn't supposed to do that, but she'd already colored it, so I put it in here. But she was from 1950, and so it's like describing how some of their land had been taken over, or just different things they had done. I thought it was important for her to understand that Native Americans are not just historical. So I'm kind of trying to like get her to grasp that concept that there are still American Indians, there are still Native Americans. They're just, we keep reading about them from a historical context, not a cultural context. So we're reading about them from 1600, and to put them into today's perspective is important too. So we did that. Then we covered a song, America. We enjoyed this. We're still working on it, still working on memorizing it. And we've listened to that a couple times a week, and we've really dug into those definitions again. And I love that. The history of the song is actually a British song about the Queen. So it's really neat to find out those different things. And then we've done that for probably 2 weeks. And then we did Pilgrims. So here's her Pilgrims. And we did 1620, the year of the Pilgrims. This book is amazing. I love Genevieve Foster. I found this old library book somewhere. I don't know where. I'm not from the library. And we read the whole thing. And let me tell you, this book helped me understand and place the Pilgrims in history. And we just kept talking about 1620. So she really knows, I really know when the Pilgrims got here. And not only do we understand when we got here, we understand what was happening around the world. We understand there's a section in here. So we learn about not just the Pilgrims coming to the New World and how they interacted with the natives and what happened. We also then learn about what was happening back in England, and we go all the way through the 30 Years' War. We also learn about the artists and scientists that were relevant in 1620, so Shakespeare and Rembrandt and Galileo, and there's just so many things were happening at that time period in history, not just the Pilgrims landing. And so it helps you to place that. And then we also just covered around the world. What was happening around the world in 1620? This book's amazing to add to a unit study, or anyone that's studying the Pilgrims. Highly recommend that book. Then we dug into colonial times. That's where we are now. So we are just finishing that up. And we did If You Lived in Colonial Times. About this book, my daughter read it in like one sitting. I was going to read it with her, but she already finished it. And we did do a few other colonial books. I think I don't even have them up here. They were like in the kitchen in colonial times, and it's like the historical reenactment books. Because we did make bread, and we made, we made bread and jam, and we made butter, and we did all those little fun crafts. And then we also loved this book. It's projects about colonial life. There is a project on making a windmill in here that we might try. I got this from the library. Anyways, it was just hands-on history projects. We probably will do at least another one or two of these because we plan on kind of covering the colonies as we do those states that were colonies as well. And so this book also, we read all of the autumn. It's a pretty thick book and it's a lot of projects in it. So we've covered all of the autumn, but there's a couple more projects like a corn husk doll, I think, and something else she wanted to do out of here. So we still do have to cover those. Let me not get ahead of myself. All right, so readers, we read Pilgrim Adventures, which was our first read aloud with My Father's World. And then we are currently reading The Courage of Sarah Noble. And then I had Abby read Pocahontas and The Strangers by Clyde Robert Beulah. Clyde Robert Beulah is one of her favorite authors, and we've had this on the shelf forever. So she's reading that. We also did the D'Olier Pocahontas. I did not remember that, to get that from downstairs, but she did, or maybe it's in her room. And then I'm currently reading her Naya Nuki, the Shoshone Girl Who Ran. And this is another book that's been on our shelf for years. And I kept thinking like one day we're going to read it. And finally we had the chance. And I have actually a couple other books by this author we may read. And so this is about a young girl who was a friend of Sacagawea, and they were actually abducted together by like an enemy tribe, and she escapes and makes her way back to her people. And it's that story, and it's really inspiring and also historically accurate. So we've been mapping it too. So that's a really fun way to learn history. I don't want to say it's a fun story, but a fun way to learn geography and history that doesn't feel like I'm just giving her facts to memorize, because it's definitely not a fun story, because like it's kind of like sad a lot of times. She's a young girl, but it's relatable to my daughter, and so she's really enjoyed this. And we've been doing this at like bedtime, not super late, but at night. Okay, so let's see, readers in our timeline. This is our timeline. We don't do our timeline on the wall. A lot of people do. We just don't have space for it. We keep a book of centuries, and I just put it all in this big binder. And we've added a few things. I love the format that they give. They're just little nice pictures that my daughter can cut out and add to there. And like I said, we've added a few things, and I like that we're doing it in this because we have switched curriculum a couple times. So you'll notice like there's ones we've done with sunlight, and so placed in the time period, you understand like, oh wow, that's awesome. That's one of the things we actually noticed, was that when they found the Rosetta Stone was like much later than the Pilgrims. My daughter was really interested in that fact. So I recommend a book of centuries, especially if you don't have the wall space, not time, but the wall space. Another thing that we did a lot this year were crafts. So far, I don't have all of them. I do have a bunch of the natives. So she made little canoes when we were learning about the French explorers, and the birch bark canoes that they had that the Native Americans helped them to make. And then when we were studying Native Americans, she made a wigwam, and she made some teepees, and she painted them with watercolors. We had like the liquid watercolors. So she mixed and made some stuff there. And then she has these, this has been a favorite of ours for history, these little tube people. She has like the Powhatan and then the Jamestown settlers, and we have tons and tons, and I'm throwing them, just tons of them. So like little fire, they're so cute, and she's just set them up with all of her little crafts she's made, and we've left them out the entire time. One last thing I was gonna show you, well, two last things. We love these. So if you've never got Fandex, like I said, we are gonna be covering more of the tribes, the American Indian tribes this year, because I just didn't feel like there was enough of it, and it's something my daughter's very interested in, so we're just digging deeper into that topic. But I liked this. I've never actually seen this one. I ordered this from Christian Book, and I'll link it below. And this has been a favorite of ours also. And then lastly, when we're doing current events, I have these two. So for current events, World Kids, we love World Kids. We use this with My Father's World sends us these, which Luckily, that doesn't have my current address. My Father's World sends us these, and we really enjoy them. Like, we really have enjoyed using them. And I want to show you. So it comes with a map. Like, there's a map you can pull out in here. So if you need a nice world map, a nice political map that shows you all the countries, and then this is great. The first one will come with that, and then it has these stories, and they're always, I don't want to say usually, they're always very appropriate to my daughter's age. There's not a lot of content that's not for her in there. So I would highly recommend World Kids if you're looking for current events. And then also another recommendation I have this year, we have not been able to do a ton of field trips. Like, it just hasn't happened with COVID, and we don't have co-op like normal this year. And I've had some health issues, and normally we would have went on tons and tons and tons of field trips by now. We just haven't. I mean, we've went to the apple orchard. I'm trying to think. We've went to the park. We've done our nature studies, and my husband is a park ranger, so we've went to the park quite a bit, like once a week on Mondays. We usually go, weather permitting, but we just haven't done what we normally would do. So I picked this up, and we live in the state of Ohio, and this is a park passport for the state. And I liked this one because we do have the national parks, but this one has just the stickers. So as we go, she can just take the sticker out of the back, and we can try to hit as many of these state parks as we can this year locally, like in socially distancing and doing all of that, and get in some of those field trips, because normally we would have went on so many field trips. So like, for instance, I had planned that we were going to do a dairy farm field trip and a bakery field trip and a newspaper field trip all in the last few weeks, and obviously that didn't happen. So parks are what we're going to be doing most of the year for field trips. Let me know what you guys are doing for field trips. That's something I'm really struggling with, is getting her out more and doing those things that we normally would do. So let me know what you guys are doing for field trips. Let me know what history you're loving this year, what history books, what topics you're covering with your 3rd, 4th, 5th graders. Like, that later elementary school range is what I'm really into right now. And also let me know if you are using My Father's World, how you're liking it. And if there's anything you want me to go more in depth with or cover, let me know below. Don't forget to hit like and subscribe.